What's up, guys? Riccardo Baleia here with another edition of the Riccardo Baleia Podcast. This is episode 15. And before we get to today's guest, I kindly ask that you like this video, make sure you hit the subscription, share the video, and you're going to want to share this because we're going to be getting some of the greatest jiu-jitsu knowledge on the planet. And as of course, it's time for me to introduce my guest here, Mr. Roger Gracie. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, Riccardo. It's a pleasure being here. Sir, very excited.
All right. And I want to first, before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to one of our mutual friends, Charles Negromonte, for putting us in touch. I've watched Charles compete over the years, really tough guy. And, I just want to give a big shout out to Charles. I know he's one of your guys as well. Yeah.
He's in Australia. So, we can tell him we miss him in London.
That's it. So, I've been following your career. And, a lot of people, of course, they know some of your biggest matches at Worlds and Pan Ams and ADCC. But I'm not sure if you know, I was actually there in Florida in 2001 when you were a purple belt and you're still, I believe, a teenager. And the story that I got for you is my instructor at the time, this guy named Jeff Joslin, he was in the division and he was your first round opponent. Really? So yeah, so the days leading up to the tournament, we're in Pan Ams, we came from Canada, and the one thing that he was kind of saying is like, man, I hope I don't get Roger first round.
That's why he got me a first round, because
That's it. He spoke it. It's like if you speak it into the universe, you're going to attract it, right? So words have power, like they say. But the story, the point I'm trying to make is we knew about your name and we knew a little bit about you at that time, but you weren't really, Roger of the legend that you are now. But did you know at that point in your career, even as a young teenager, that, you had maybe this intimidation effect on other athletes? And also, do you feel like at that point, you knew that this was where you were going to be in your life? Like jiu-jitsu was for you and that was going to be your career and you were destined to be the best in the world? I know that's a fully loaded question, but I think it's a good one.
So let me try to answer that. So I think ever since I started to become good, I think when my last year as a blue belt, I was reaching like a high level. I was a very high level blue belt, let's say. I was always competing. So you can see your opponent, on the same belts. They already knew they were going to have a hard fight. Ever since I got into that level, like the end of my blue belt, and then suddenly when I also got my purple belt, straight away I was already high level purple belt. So I think I could see people was always worried. They knew that they were coming in for a hard fight because they could see me from the previous fight. So I could see on them in the same way, the people that I was fighting, I could see by the previous fight before the tournaments, or like the good guys, I knew already that was coming in for a hard fight. So I knew that like every time I was fighting as a good guy, they already expected, this is not going to be easy.
So, we talk about that. It was 2001 Pan Ams. Like I said, you were a purple belt. And I remember, my friend who I was training with was an Alliance guy. And after you won and you went through your division, kind of walked through it, Romero Jacare came over and he spoke to my friend. He's like, man, he goes, don't be down, because that kid can go in the black belt division and do the exact same thing. So it was a funny moment. And, that was when I was like, oh shit, I really got to pay attention to this Gracie. But let's fast forward a little bit, obviously a little bit later on in your career as a young brown belt, you had some big tests in front of you. And, you went into ADCC, I believe, still as a brown belt, if I'm not mistaken. Your first ADCC? No, you were a black belt already? Okay.
I was a black belt. I got the black belt a couple of weeks before that.
Okay. So, but before that, I remember there's a famous match on the internet at the Brazilian Team Championship. And you actually you're in the brown and black belt mixed divisions because that's how they used to do the team championship. But you fought Demian Maia. And this video kind of just got put out there. And people been, watching this video like crazy because it was really exciting. I think that both of you guys fought very aggressively, and it was awesome to watch. So what do you remember about that match and maybe, you know, fighting other black belts in that tournament specifically, or that match with Demian. What's your memory? If you could kind of break down that match for me and, you know, what happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember that fight clearly because that's one of the fights that they actually stuck into my mind. That even, you know, to this day, it was a very significant fight for me. That's why it had a huge importance because I was just coming up. You know, I stay. It was probably the biggest fight on my brown belt. You know, suddenly it's like the national teams brown and black together. So you're not just fighting brown. You know, you suddenly, because it's almost like the black belt is when you become professional in jiu-jitsu. You know, pretty much like up to brown belt, you can consider yourself an amateur because you're not black belt. You're not fighting against the best. So the best is in the black belt. So anyway, so when, you know, that tournament is black, brown, black together, it's, you know, you don't know who you're fighting. And I think that was the last fight of the group. So, you know, like it was important for my group for me to win so we can go to the next step. And, you know, I remember clearly walking to that fight. You know, in my point of view, I'm like, I'm the black sheep here. You know, like he's the black belt. You know, he got the black belt before me. I remember watching fight, having big fights in the black belt. You know, so I already knew he was almost like a step ahead of me. You know, he's a black, and I'm brown. So in my mind, I'm like, this is war. Like I have to win. But at the same time, it wasn't kind of different, the challenge that I was facing in the academy, because, you know, Gracie Barra back then, it was one of the, if not the strongest academy in the world. So for the past years, I was training with really high level people. You know, even though, of course, you know, Demian is very good, you know, his level is really high, but that type of hard training, I was already used to in the academy. You know, so I was facing people that were even ahead of him, you know, like Roleta, Nino, you know, such a, you know, Gordo. There was so many great guys in the black belt, world champion. They were my training partners. So when I was facing him, it wasn't suddenly, it's like you're facing something completely, something that you're not used to it, you know, that big challenge. Oh my God, this is too big for me. Mm-hmm. I mean, no, I've been fighting guys harder than him in the gym, and I'm going at them, you know, like we were having wars. So when I went to face him in that fight, I was like, man, this is my time. You know, I need to give everything. So it was like no strategy. You know, usually I'm like a slow starter. You know, I think after a few years on my black belt, I allow myself to start low. It gave me that confidence that, okay, I can push the pace in a few minutes. I don't have to start from scratch. But with him, I'm like, I cannot allow myself to start slow and then I might lose in the end. So I'm like, I'm starting full on. So the fight started in a very fast pace, and, you know, like taking downs and sweeps. And I remember like halfway through the fight, I look at the scorecard. I'm losing by 2 points and I'm dead. Like my energy level is like very low because I just tried to take him down a couple of times. I had the single leg and I'm really pushing and I'm tired. And then, you know, I had to kind of slow the pace down into, you know, in become a slightly more technical fight because, you know, my energy level was like really low. And there was one moment in the fight that I'm in his guard. I'm kind of in the half guard, you know, he has some hooks and even though in the half guard. And then suddenly there's a position that I do from half guard that I mount people straight away, you know, that I go from half guard straight to mount. And I'm able to do that on him. And that suddenly, you know, 7 points. So that put me straight away much ahead of him. And I remember at that moment when I mount, I'm like, fight is mine now. You know, it's like, now there's no chance that he can recover this. You know, there's like 2 minutes, I don't know, 2-3 minutes up to the fight. And even though that I was in the mount, I'm like, I'm going to finish him. So and I went like straight to the neck. I'm trying to attack, and then suddenly he escaped. You know, he put him back in the guard, and I think a few seconds later, then the fight was over. But yeah, I mean, I remember almost the whole fight. You know, that was one of the fights that really stuck into my memory.
So, you answered something that some people have been asking about that match, and I think that was really cool. A lot of people were like, "Well, man, why is he celebrating so much?" And I think that it was because of your team advanced in the team competition. So that was a very important match. A couple of things that kind of came in my mind as you were discussing this. Number one, you mentioned some of the elite level guys from Gracie Barra, guys like Nino, Roleta, guys that had very distinct styles. They were very different styles. Roleta, obviously, with his helicopter guard, Nino with the omoplata, gogoplata, you name it. But you kind of made this style unique to yourself. Yours was more of the classical jiu-jitsu style, very judo style takedowns, close guard mount, back take, nothing too crazy. How did you develop your own style training in a room full of people with such different styles? Was that something that maybe just kind of grew naturally, that you advanced, or is it something that maybe your father kind of instilled on you? Can you explain that a little bit?
I think everyone naturally developed their own style. If you think of Roleta, for example, he has such a unusual style, and no one in the academy done anything like him. The helicopter armbar, he probably made that up. And a lot of the things that the type of guard he played, no one taught him, because no one never done that before. So he just adapt. He learned. He trained for many years, and then he developed his own style. I think same way with me and everyone else. Like, no one never told me, go down this way. This is what's gonna make you good. I've never heard that. No one ever told me stick to the basics. That's what the most important, and that's what actually works. Don't worry about the rest. I've never heard that. No one told me. I think naturally it just happened that I developed that game.
So when I talk about your style, a question that I have a lot of questions, by the way, and I'm going to try to get through them in this time. But a lot of people asked me some questions when I announced that I was going to do this with you, and some of them were kind of crazy, some of them were amazing. So I want to try to get to the good ones. But one of the ones, especially that I've been thinking of, is I talk about the positions that you were tending to gravitate towards, which was the close guard and mount. And a lot of people, talk about positions in reverse. Essentially a close guard is a reverse mount and vice versa. Or, if you're mounted, you're essentially in the close guard just on top. How did you develop such an amazing close guard and mount attack, and specifically the cross collar choke seems to be one of your most deadliest weapons throughout the years. What was it about that specific technique that you kind of gravitated towards, and how did you develop it? Like, it's not something that's it's, especially at the higher levels, it gets to be kind of difficult to do, and you were doing it against some of the best in the world. So how did you get so damn good at that position?
Training and practice. There's no other answer for that. If you think, like, going back to close guard, it was, I always like to play from my back. I like to play the top game as well, but especially in my early stage, like blue belt, purple belt, even brown belt, because my takedown was very weak. So you kind of almost get used to being on your back, you pulling guard, even though that, of course, my passing was not bad. I had a good guard pass, but let's say my guard was better than my top game. And it's, close guard. I remember I've been playing since I was young, like blue belt, because it's people, they don't realize, but it's a one-sided position. If you're inside my close guard, you cannot attack me. That's not really efficient attack from the top in the close guard. It's completely one-sided. You have to fully defend yourself from my attacks and mainly focus in opening the guard. Like, this is what you have to do inside a close guard. So you're not attacking me. I'm not in danger. You're not trying to pass. You have no mobility because you're stuck. We are attached. So it's a very good position for the person in the bottom, especially people with long legs. So I knew that. I knew that ever since my young age. So I always liked close guard. I always pulled close guard. And it's, if you look at my fights ever since I was a blue belt, if I'm pulling guard, I'm pulling close guard. And when you say about the cross collar choke, jiu-jitsu is a very, very hard sport for you to be good at it. For you to be really good. It's not easy, and there's so many variations of attacks, so many different attacks, but it's the way I see jiu-jitsu is you try to dominate your opponent. Is a fight for dominance and control and submission. That's the whole point of it, and that's how I always saw jiu-jitsu. So it's what's the ultimate position that you can most control your opponent. There's two in jiu-jitsu which they are the most dominant. It's mount and back. That's the as a control and dominance over your opponent. That's the end of the line, because from there the only thing after that is the submission. There's no more progression for the improving your position. Okay, you can think of, I will improve my position if your arm is here instead of here, but then we're talking like minimum details about the whole control of it. That's how you can most dominate someone. If you can mount another person, you're fully dominating that person. There's no doubt about it. If I get your back, I'm fully dominating you. Like, I have the whole advantage in whichever way you see fighting, sports, any type of style, any way you see it. That's how you can be the most dominant in a position to secure someone. And from that is submission. So that was always my goal. The way I see fighting, we start standing up. The end of the line for me is I'm either going to mount or get your back. Of course, you have a lot of submissions down, along the way. There's like dozens. I'm not against them, of course I'm not. But that's you. As long as you want to keep improving your position and your control, your dominance over your opponent, that's the end line. That's where you will see yourself, whichever direction you go. It's like in pull guard, takedown, or whatever way the fight starts. That's the end of the line, and then from there, there's only submission. There's nothing more. If I'm mounting on you, the only thing I can do more is try to submit you. There's nothing. I'm not going to go back to your guard to improve my control over you. I'm not in danger. I'm mounting on you. So anyway, and if you start thinking like from the mount, what submissions are there? You have a few, but mainly is choke and arm, right? That's it. It's arm lock. Now, you have the Americana, but it's very hard. Let's say you don't see it happen very often. It does happen, but not very often. The most common is, let's say arm lock is the first. If you mount someone, the first thing, the most submission that you see people going in, arm lock, number one, no doubt. Number two is choke. It's either Ezekiel or cross-collar choke, but you see much less, because it is much harder for you to choke someone than you attack the arm. And if you look, all my previous fights, my previous tournaments, you didn't see me choking people in the mount before, like, let's say 2009, when I finished everyone from the mount. Before, there was sometimes, rarely, I finished someone from the choke in the mount. It was hard. So it just took me years and years to develop. People didn't realize how long it actually takes for you to, it took me years, it's like years after I was a black belt, but it's the persistence, I always try to improve my skills in every aspect in jiu-jitsu, and I never stopped developing. And, the results it showed, especially in 2009. And the same way that I worked in developing my attacks, you don't see people developing the defense. People just don't. You can get the highest jiu-jitsu players in the world. I'm pretty sure a lot of them have good defense in the mount. I'm not saying that they don't, but it's for sure that's not one of the strongest points, because I can guarantee they do not let people mount on them often and working on the defense. I doubt it. Of course they do, but not persistence in a way that is going to allow you to develop your defenses in a very high level. So it didn't match them.
You talk about defense a little bit there, and how this is a two-part question. As a competitor and as a teacher, where do you kind of balance out your focus on defense and offense? So for you as a competitor, how much time did you spend like maybe positional sparring to defend positions? And as an instructor, how much do you kind of make your students kind of focus on defensive positions? Like I know at Renzo School, Danaher has a lot of the guys starting, with the arm bar or the back or mount. Do you kind of, do sort of those drills as well? Because I know when we talk about defense, your defense was impeccable, in your day, in your competition days. So you obviously spent time on defense, and that's sort of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu motto, is having unbelievable defense. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the time that I spend like offense and defense is the same. It's always the same, because with whoever you're training with, it can be your training partners, your student, or anyone. It's, if we're going to practice mount, if I stay on top of you 5 minutes, now you stay on top of me 5 minutes. And it's been always like that ever since I was a yellow belt. That every time there's specific training, there's like something specific, is both sides. First you attack, and then you reverse the position, because the training is not specifically for you, it's for everyone. And even then, even though they might be just for you, but you cannot just worry about your attacks and not defense, or or the other way around. So it's the same. And in you're saying about in the academy, is the same thing. Like it's, I'm giving them pretty much the way I learn is sparring. You have fun when you do full sparring. You're having fun, enjoying, you're training hard. But if you want to really develop your skill level, you have to do specific training, because it's very hard to develop much when you spar. Because if you will know that when you spar, when you train somebody very good, how long will you be able to practice your mount? If you mount that other person, because you're such a high, even if you do mount, you'll be like a minute of that training. It's not enough. It's for you to actually develop your skills, you have to be specific training.
So I kind of goes into a question that I had from Tim Spriggs. Obviously, we know Tim. He's a pretty world-renowned competitor, one of the best in the world as well. And he asked, as far as specific training, how did you study your opponents? And maybe even did you study your opponents before going into competition? Or did you kind of, go with what Rickson would say, with kind of flow with the go kind of thing? Were you going in there with specific strategies and tactics, or did you review tape before tournaments, or was it just, you were confident in your abilities and you kind of went forward at it?
I'm not really. I mean, I don't want to sound cocky, but I never really studied any of my opponents, like really study. Of course I watched their fights, but every time I went to, to fight, let's say in the World Championship, of course there were some names in my division, especially the top guys. I watched a few of their fights they had before on the internet. Back then it was not many, but you could find some. And as far from studying, that's all I did. I watched a few of their fights, because I never care about setting up a strategy to fight anyone, because the moment that I do that, I will have to change my game pretty much, and instead of thinking, what do I have to do to block him? It's what I think is the opposite. I'm just going to try to do my best. Whatever he comes up, I will try. I don't know what he's going to come up with. So you cannot, I never cared about setting a strategy, then, saying, okay, this is what's going to happen in the fight, because it is not. How many times you study something and it just doesn't happen the way the fight goes, in a complete different way. Sometimes the guy pulls guard and you prepare for takedown. So all that training you did, what happened now? You lost. Now suddenly mentally it's like, oh, this is not what I trained for. What do I do? So, as far as strategy, it's like if the guy has like a amazing stand up, I'm just gonna pull guard. If he has amazing guard, maybe I'll try to pull guard before him. That's pretty much it. I never really care much about what my opponents will do, but not that I, like I say, I don't want to sound cocky. It's not that I don't care what they do. Of course I care, but I never prepare, because you will only know what they'll try to do against you when they try. And
Got it.
I rather implement my game than worry about, or having to change to deal with whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And talking about some of the matches you've had before, and I wanna kind of look back at something that Comprito said to me recently. I know he messaged you or something about it too, and he said something that kind of blew my mind, because I always saw you as this competitor. Man, you're a tall guy, you're a big guy, and we were talking on my podcast a few weeks ago, and he was saying how he's like, man, Roger is like not super strong like everyone thinks. It's not his strength. Sorry, let me rephrase that. He's saying it's not Roger's strength that makes him special. It's his technique, and it's the way he moves and adjusts his body around the technique. And I couldn't believe that. Comprito, he had felt you. He's competed against you twice. You defeated him twice. So it was an honest opinion as opposed to us just looking on you on video. And I respected that a lot from him. But was that the consequence of maybe... Let me rephrase that. Like, I know myself in the academy, I'm a bigger guy, so I try to always start from the bottom. So was your technique developed because you were kind of a larger person? Do you feel that you had to make adjustments because of your size, and that sort of elevated your technical level as well?
No, I think the reason that I developed, my technique the way it did, I was never a strong person, physically very strong. I mean, I'm not weak. If I'm, every time I was fully prepared, to fight in the worlds. Of course, physically, I was really prepared from training. I was not, I don't consider myself weak. Like my grip was like rock solid. But in terms of power, I was never strong, in terms of lifting weight. I was like very physically well prepared. My grip was like rock solid, but maybe I get a guy that's like 10 kilos lighter than me. I mean, we're going to squat and bench press together. He's going to lift 3 times more than I. So I was never that guy that when we go to the gym to lift weights, you see me pushing, hundreds of kilos. I was actually always weak in terms of lifting weight. I got, almost all the guys that we train, I was always, below everyone. Not below everyone else, but I was, I was never the guy that lifts a lot of weight. So physically, I was not strong, in terms of power. You can squat 300 kilos. No, so that, I was not a powerful guy. I wasn't, you never see me, especially, up to, I don't know, early 20s. I was never muscular, you never see me with like big muscles. I was like very tall. Of course, I had some. I was like training a lot, really well prepared, but you never see me with like, big muscles, especially on my, like my teenage years, early 20s. So I had to rely on my skills. And, back then, ever since I like started training hard, like 15, 16, I was very tall, so I always trained with people sort of more or less my weight, but they're on my weight with muscle. I'm like on their weight with size. So I could never overpower them. So I had to develop my skills. I had to, there was no choice because I couldn't outpower them. So, then over the years, the skills just got developed because of that. And, with the specific training, it's, when you train like long sessions, if you use a lot of power, you get tired fast. So you're not going to last. So it's, the way I train and the way my body was, like I had to rely on my technique.
So, I know a lot of people ask you obviously about the Jacare fight, and I don't want to talk about that. I was there. That was amazing. It was, one of the greatest moments, and that event was insane. And I think, a lot of people assume that, Jacare was one of your biggest rivals, obviously, but a guy that I feel like, also brought the best out of you and gave you a really good matches, historical matches, was Shinji. Can you talk a little bit about, your matches with Shinji and, how technically and tactically, he presented a challenge for you as a competitor?
Yeah, I mean, Shinji, I think we fought each other 8 times, maybe something like that. It was like many, many times. So it's, I mean, he always gave me like a, great challenge. We had some like great battles together. You see, ever since we both got a black belt. We kind of almost facing each other, sort of semifinals, finals in almost every tournament we fought. We almost same weight division, and he always fought in the open weight. And I think guys like him, even though, I mean, him and Jacare, Jacare was another one till he's actually stopped competing jiu-jitsu. I always knew, that we were almost gonna fight against each other in the finals, each one on the side of the brackets. But it's, when you think about, when I'm gonna fight, I might face those guys in the final. You just want to train harder, and harder. So yeah, I think that if you have competitors on that level, you really want to push yourself even harder.
Okay, so I actually got a question here from Gordon Ryan, of all people. So a question from Gordon to you. So his question was, from a technical standpoint, what did you feel separated you from the rest of the competition? It doesn't have to just be one thing, but what technically, in your opinion, kind of made you stand apart from the crowd and allowed you to easily submit the people of your generation and even the younger generations? Obviously your span at the IBJJF worlds lasted such a long time. So what did you feel that you were doing, technically different than a lot of other people?
I mean, technically not much. I don't know exactly how other people train because I was not there, but you cannot be that much different than what I was doing. I was trained really hard. I've trained as much as I can. I try to develop skills in different situations, like I said, with the specific training. And I mean, as far as training, that's all you can do. You can train really hard every day or 3 times a day or 5 times a day, but as far as training goes, that's all you can do. And I think there's no doubt about it. What separates me from the other guys is my mind. That's what separates people who actually achieve, something really big from everyone else that is trying. I think every aspect in life, anything, regardless of what it is, regardless of what you're trying to do, there's 1,000 people who wants the same things of you, regardless, anything. And a lot of the times, you're not the most hard worker in the group. You're not. So how come, some people, they actually push themselves far away from the rest? It's 100% is the mentality. It's, your body can only push you up to a limit. After that is only the mind.
And what sort of things do you do to kind of develop that confidence and that mindset? Is there sort of mental, like people have mental coaches and mental training, or meditation, all sorts of things like that? What did you do to kind of develop this like laser focused mindset?
Nothing. It's what I always try to achieve. What's people's goal? It's people, they go after the dream, after they go, what are you trying to achieve? And I always try to be the best fighter. That was always my goal. I'm like, I just want to be the best. I don't care about, it's not about winning or losing. Of course, winning, it shows you're the best. But, a lot of the times, I lost. It's like controversial fight. But, for me, I won that fight. So the results, it doesn't really matter, just because the referee didn't see something. But you just did your best, and it's all in there. What do you want? It's like I want to be the best. So just winning for me is not enough. That's why I got so good in my submission skills. Every time I won, if I won by advantage, or if I win by advantage or 2 points, I mean, some people that they are satisfied with that. And that's, for me, is not enough. Like if I beat by advantage, or if I win by like a small margin of points, I mean, I was always angry with myself, because it can go both ways. Okay, you won this time because you got a sweep in the end, or you got the advantage, but you can fight him 10 times, and sometimes the fight will not go your way because it's too close. You letting that it's. It can be either way. Like one mistake, you will cost you the fight. So for me, it was always about submitting my opponents. I need to prove myself I'm better than the person I'm fighting. And the only way to do that is to fully dominate them and submit them. That's why, when I say fully dominating them, you want to be, what's the most dominant position you can be? Mount. That's why you see me reaching the mount. So you can ask the same questions to other fighters. They don't see they don't see fighting that way. They don't want to fully dominate the opponent and submit them. Their goal is they just want to win, regardless of how they win. So they had they're happy to be in the guard, scoring some advantage, and holding the fight to the end. They win, amazing. They're happy with it, and they're satisfied. They don't see, how they can improve. I just see the other way.
So, talking about your career, you were competing black belt since 2003, and you ended up going against Petipano, which was one of the greatest of all time as well. And your career has really lasted. Like I said, you competed against Buchecha recently. How important was that match for you to kind of, after the Metamoris match, and how important was it for you to kind of come back and get that win against Buchecha? You really didn't have anything else that you had to prove, and kind of like you have the respect of the entire community. And when we talk about the greatest of all time, a lot of people, it's funny because there's debate all the time about the greatest of all time. People, oh no, it's this guy, it's Marcelo, it's this, it's Tenere, but whenever your name is mentioned, people respect that, and there's no debate. You know what I mean? So when you came back and sort of solidified your legacy, defeating Buchecha, why was that match so important for you to take?
It's more, I think it has to do with our previous fight when I fought in Metamoris, that we fought to a draw. And I think on that fight, even though there was a draw, we drew, but I felt like that fight got stuck into my throat. Like I was not happy with that fight. Like I thought I had a terrible performance. It was with everything. It was a fight to submission only. There was no points. I didn't get close to submitting, and he almost took my arm home. In the end, and he attacked my foot in the middle of the fight. Like I got very tired, so for the last few minutes, I was like just surviving. I couldn't, perform the way I wanted, and I knew, coming into that fight, my condition was terrible. But anyway, and then that fight goes, and then he started winning more and more world titles, and then he almost got that. People there, a lot of people were saying, Buchecha is better, which I don't care about what other people think, but I think on my end, I was just not happy with that fight. So it's like I can't have him, the guy that afterwards they will say, he's better than me, or he has a lot more titles, and he almost took your arm home in that fight. So how come how come I can say I'm better than him? Even though that I always thought I was, but it doesn't matter. So it's like, man, in my last fight, I can't finish my career with that stuck in my throat. Like I'm not happy with the last fight we had. I'm like, no, man, I can't stop till I fight him again.
So so basically it was more of like a personal thing than as opposed to like trying to do it for the naysayers or anyone else. So it was I
don't care what other people.
Okay,
and it wasn't nothing about he has more titles than me. It's nothing about that. I always, when he was getting close to, to 10, I always knew he was gonna win more. It's like, he's a brilliant fighter. He's having an amazing career. I respect him a lot as a fighter, as a person. But it was more about personal, especially with the last fight we had. I'm like, man, I can't let their fight be what what would dictate of our skills level. Because. For me, that fight, he got the best out of it. It was a draw. I didn't, nothing happened, but he almost finished me, and I did not got close to finish him. But I'm like, no, that cannot happen.
So when we look at, the history books and all the guys that you've defeated in your career, just you name it, you've beaten them. Is there anyone that you kind of wish you had the opportunity to face, maybe from this generation or maybe previous? And the one guy I think of is the match with you and Rodolfo would have been something spectacular. Was that something that you feel like you didn't really need to do? Or is there something, like you said, like something stuck in your throat, or one person that, you know what, I wish I would have tested myself against them or had the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to play, to fight against the best out there, because that's how you can really put your skill levels to the very test. But I don't feel that I don't have the feeling that I had to have that fight, or I think you wouldn't be good for me to fight Rodolfo, because I think he's very good. You would have been a big challenge, even like Leon Julo, all those guys that came after me. And I think it would have been a great match, but it's the fact that we didn't fight. It makes no really difference for me. Nothing. It's like whatever. You wouldn't be another challenge, just like I had thousands as others before. So I'm not saying that I would have won for sure. I'm not trying to put it that way. Of course, fighting goes both ways, but I don't regret not having fought them.
So another question I had was, looking at your career, you've been able to kind of stay ahead of a lot of the trends in the sport, a lot of the technical trends, a lot of the lapel stuff, and a lot of changes in the technical evolution. You stuck to your style and you were able to stay dominant. And, one of the guys obviously right now is, with no-gi specifically, Gordon Ryan. He's kind of presenting some new challenges for the no-gi game. And I'm not asking you how would you do against Gordon specifically, but somebody with that tool set, somebody with those techniques, and then in the no-gi, what would you do against somebody like that? How would you, what do you think the mistake is that people are making against an athlete or a competitor such as Gordon?
I don't think I would have done anything different. I would just train as hard as I can. I could for, of course, he's a huge challenge. You have to be fully prepared to fight someone like him. So, in terms of preparation, I would just, train my best to be on my top shape. Like I always had for big fights. Is, you cannot underestimate anyone. And, in terms of technical, I don't think I would have done anything. It's not because it would have been him or anyone else. Let's say if I decided to, if I would have fight ADCC, again tomorrow, I would have trained exactly the same as I trained when I fought in 2005. I don't think I need to change anything else. It's training this. I would have just trained like I always did. And you ask me what I think he puts Gordon different, for him achieving what he's doing is, it's definitely his mind, the way that I see. You can see the determination that he has, and, the amount of effort he's putting on his training is, I know that because he trains in New York and my cousin's academy. So, his will is probably bigger than his opponent, so he's the kind of guy that trains like a maniac for years. That's why he's putting him ahead of others. That's why he's making him achieve what he's doing. You can see the way he believes himself. That's his biggest weapon. When you have that self-belief, that alone puts you in a very dangerous spot for your opponents, because, you add that to the hard training. What else can you do? And he's been dedicating to that, to his to develop his skill levels for so many years now in no-gi, and you don't see any other jiu-jitsu fighters doing that. They kind of doing gi and no-gi. He's like committed to years and years of training to develop his skills, and he's the way that he sees himself. He really believes in himself that he can win. So that it's when you have that kind of belief, it makes you a very dangerous fighter, your opponent.
And you mentioned that, obviously trains at Team Renzo Gracie Academy. And I feel like somebody that you've always had in your corners, especially in your biggest fights, has always been Renzo. And I think, I remember seeing you going to New York to train a lot Danaher Death Squad days. But what was it about that environment, going to New York and having a guy like Renzo in your corner, a family member, but also a fighter, that kind of helped you throughout some of these toughest challenges you faced in your career?
I think Renzo is the kind of person who he can really motivate you. He makes you believe in yourself, and he's kind of the person who you feel is giving you a lot of energy. It's kind of very hyper, and like he gives you that incentive. There's like is an extra push. When you see him shouting in the corner, it's like almost like, okay, that just gave me an extra burst of energy. So he's kind of one of the best person he can have on your corner, because that's exactly who you want to have. Person very active, who very energetic, who believes in you, who has a great vision of what the fight is, what's happening. He can give you great advices. I think that's the best thing a coach can do with you.
Yeah, he's basically the opposite of how your demeanor is, because you're very cerebral, you're very calm and cool. Even when you compete, you're very just like laser focused, and when you talk, you're very calm. And Renzo's like the ultimate hype guy. He's the ultimate hype man. He gets you riled up. It's complete opposite. But you guys have he's, like I said, he's been there for many of your challenges. MMA, ADCC, gi no gi. What would you say in your career was the pinnacle of your sport, pinnacle of the sport for you, and what was your most proudest accomplishment in your career? Would it have been your last match with Buchecha? Is there any one tournament that kind of stood out that you felt like you had to overcome so many obstacles to win that, or maybe you just did it with as close to perfection as you possibly could get?
So there's different answers, because the moments that I got the most proud of my career depends which point you're looking at it. So let's say I have a few times, but each one for a different reasons. I think when I fought in the ADCC 2005, for example, that's one of the times that I got most proud of myself fighting, as a fighter. But the reason is because that was such a hard event. Even though that you can look, okay, I had an amazing performance, I finished all my opponents, but even though that I was able to submit all my opponents, but I had many super hard fights, like very hard. We went like overtime, like a lot of my fights. So I had an amazing performance in actually submitting all my opponents, but it was the hardest tournament I've ever fought from far. In terms of difficulty, it was like very hard fights, and it showed me that I had such a heart that I never gave up. I remember, especially on the absolute like semifinal and final, I was exhausted. I was like very tired. I remember resting between the fights. I was in the back, resting, like people, they were like massaging my arms. I remember even now my body was really tired, but it's that mental, determination that's like I've never doubt myself. That thought that, or maybe the next fight would be too hard because I'm tired. It never crossed my mind. It's like it's not a question. Doesn't matter. You can lose an arm now. I would go in without an arm. So that's the mentality I had on that tournament, which made me do what I did. Like I overcome my fights and my opponents with my determination. I pushed the fight harder than them. And I was able to do what I did. And let's say when I fought, I think when I fought Buchecha, there was a very important fight as well. But it was important in terms of legacy. If I were to lose that fight, I would be considered number two. Now we'll be talking. Now you'll be, you number one. How you feel, being number two. That's pretty much what would have happened. So in terms of legacy and like putting things in line, that was the most dangerous fight of my career, pretty much. But when I fought 2000 and the World 2009, is I was very proud of my performance, but I think slightly different than the ADCC 2005 because 2009 I finished all my fights, but before the time. Like I had a very dominant performance on top of all my opponents. So in terms of skill levels, I was really proud of myself for that. I could see how I got with my skill levels different than 2005.
So a question that I have, I talked to Vitor Shaolin Ribeiro, one of the legends of our sport recently, and he made a comment to me, and I keep asking all my podcast guests this question because I think it's pretty interesting. But basically, he said people learning to train jiu-jitsu are learning right now. They're started training in the worst possible time because there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's YouTube in your hand. So when you get to class, you already have this preconceived notion of what jiu-jitsu is supposed to be like, and you're kind of confused with technique. What do you think about that statement? And also, what kind of advice do you have for, the beginners? Those tend to be the guys that are coming in with the new YouTube technique, which there's nothing wrong with that. But how important do you see the value of that as opposed to the value of, listening and trusting to your professor and focusing on what he says?
It's, of course, people can watch videos. Sometimes you can watch something in a video that's going to change your game. Suddenly, that fitted so well into my game that you learn from watching a video. But I think it's what people the expectation is. Usually people always looking for something new that's going to change their life. That's going to make them so much better. And it's I usually. I talk, I spoke about that like in a few seminars I gave, even in my academy. It's, you cannot expect some miracle position that's going to change your life. That will never happen. You will wait for the rest of your life because anything you learn, okay, you can learn something very simple, then you pick very fast, and then suddenly, you're able to apply in a high level. But every technique in jiu-jitsu, regardless of what it is, it takes time for you to develop that specific technique. Everything you learn today, you will take time. Sometimes you can take years. And people, they don't realize that. They want immediately results.
Yeah.
They want something that they'll make them win tomorrow. Teach me something that's going to make me beat that guy tomorrow. There is nothing that I can teach you that's going to make you beat a guy better than you tomorrow. The only thing that's going to make you improve is hard training and smart training. When I say about specific training, not just full sparring, if you train, the more you do specific training, the faster you develop your skill levels. You get tough doing sparring, but specifically skill levels, detail, you only learn with specific training. Because what the reason though is the repetition of the same movement over and over again, even though that you might take a while to see what you're doing wrong, after you're doing the same thing over and over again, okay, some people they see it faster, some people they don't see it that much. But if you spend, like specific training, the side control, if you spend 1 week every day practicing side control for 20 minutes, that's how you improve your side control. And I can show you a technique, to escape side control one day, but you need to try to practice, develop, because you will not get it right first. No one will get it right first. Because if you get it right, every technique you learn, you'll be the real GOAT. Because if you pick up, anything in one day, that meaning in 6 months, no one can beat you because you learn so many things in that 6 months that how come someone can beat you? If you look at the journey, let's say the white belt journey, it's, let's say, average, let's give it a year. My academy is more or less 1 year till you go to your blue belt. If you really, if you practice dedicated. 1 year of training, 1 year, you just came out of white belt. You still nothing. in terms of working, the highest level in jiu-jitsu, how many techniques you learn you learned in that year? Average people, they teach, let's say, 2 techniques a class, right?
Yeah.
There's 52 weeks a year. Make the math. Okay, you go through the same technique sometimes over the year, but that's a lot of techniques. You should be a master. Look how much you know. I mean, why you can barely apply them. So you've been learning all those techniques. You can barely apply them. So you're just a white belt, you're fresh blue belt. You're still gonna have your weight, scratch all over the mat when you train against the good guys, because everything you learn, you can still not apply correctly. It takes time to develop each and specific technique. There's people, they don't realize that is you have to insist. Don't teach me something miraculously. Teach me like a detail, and just repetition. You have to repeat. So people, they don't have that patience. That's why, it's with that mentality that only in 2009 that I start really finishing people in the mount. Not before. Before I used to go to Armlock, because it's just, I can't finish people in the cross collar choke in the mount. And I was one of the person that trains the most. I trained my whole life. I taught my whole life. And look how many years it took me to develop that. And I mean, that's used with every aspect, every technique in the game. People, they don't have the patience and to make a small changes to, it's a small change that's going to make that Kimura on the side work well. It's not switching to the arm lock because I can't get Kimura. You can't get because you're not doing right. Don't thinking something else to do it. Focus, insist. That's how you're going to get better.
No substitute for hard work, like they say. And I think that, today's generation, they want that quick result. They want the 6-minute abs. They want everything fast, but I appreciate that a lot, what you said there. I think that was, was some gold there for a lot of the beginners and even some of the people training for a long time. I know you're really stuck on time, and I got one last question for you, and I appreciate your time very much. But, this past weekend, Ronaldo Jacare was supposed to fight in the UFC and end up testing positive for COVID-19. Something that you kind of went through. You're looking good. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How was that? Like, when did you get it? How did you overcome? At what point did you feel better? Tell me a little bit about that journey, and we'll kind of finish things off there.
Yeah. So it was right like mid-March, right early on when this pandemic was. The pandemic was starting, especially in the UK. So it's something weird. It's like it is like a flu. It's like a flu symptoms. I just had like high fever, like coughing, feel very weak, like headache, and it just lasts me for like 10 days. I think was the high fever for 10 days in a row. That's what destroyed your body, because you feel so weak. The fever, just drains your energy, and then suddenly you're not eating well, you're not really hungry, and then gladly it has, but there's like no medicine. All you can take is like paracetamol to keep the fever down, and just stay in bed and wait to pass.
Did you feel like I suffer from asthma, and did you feel like in your lungs or like your chest, did you feel like, extreme discomfort, like people are saying? Because that's the thing that scares the shit out of me when I listen to this stuff. Yeah. I get concerned about that. Did you feel that at all? Or was it mostly just the fever and other symptoms?
It was most the fever. I had it for like 10 days, and then 2 days I had like tiny bit of fever during the night, when you woke up sweating, but there was like a little bit on the last 2 days. So on the 6th day, I remember waking up like 2 a.m. Suddenly my heartbeat was like quite accelerated, and I was out of breath a little bit, but not too much. But I was a little bit, like almost like you did I went upstairs fast. Suddenly I woke up through that, like my heart beating is fast, and then I'm like, I'm feeling bad, and then I'm like, shit, man, I'm gonna die. And my girlfriend, I woke up, I said, look, I don't feel well, my lungs, but nothing like I can't breathe.
Okay.
I think probably my heartbeat accelerated because I got nervous. Then suddenly, like shit, all the thing you watched on TV is like, oh my God, now it's in my lungs. Now I need the tube,
Tube,
like,
yeah.
what do I do? Yeah, but then I called the service in the UK. They did some tests, like they tell you to, count from 1 to 30 in one go, and then they will see how out of breath you get. That's how they can pretty much see how your lungs are being affected. But you only last like an hour, and then it kind of got back to normal. And then I went back to sleep, and then the fever came back, and then like 3 days later, it started to drop.
Well, on behalf of the jiu-jitsu community, we're very thankful that you're better, so you can continue to, do these podcasts and share your knowledge with the world. Like I said, I know you're stuck for time, so I just want to say thank you very much for taking your time today.
Thank you.
It's been incredible. Like I said, I saw you in 2001 as a purple belt, young kid, and seeing your career this whole, 20 years, what you've become, and one of the most dominant gi fighters of all time, amazing no-gi competitor, and truly the GOAT. Many people call you that, and I think that there's no dispute. A lot of people say that because you're one of the only guys to do what you've done, gi and no-gi, and won as many world titles, beating guys like Buchecha. So congratulations on your career. All your success, wishing you well with your academies. I have some friends that, train with you as well, and they can't speak well enough about you. Hopefully I get to come to the UK and train, and you can kick my ass and cross collar choke me from Mount. But
I'll try my best. I'll be here.
Okay. All right. So once again, thank you so much, Roger. And if for you guys watching at home, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Please share it. Please like it. Please go check out Roger's social media channels. Give him a follow. He's putting out more free content lately. I love it. I get to learn from the man himself on YouTube. So once again, thank you very much, Roger Gracie.
Thank you, Riccardo. Thank you very much. Awesome pleasure being here, man.
All right. Thank you, guys. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Get outside. Get some sunshine. And we'll see you guys next week.